Welcome, Honors Algebra 2. We are going to continue with 1-4. So we are getting into 1-4 with factorable equations. So this is still 1-4, but now we are focusing on factorable equations. Okay, so some of these are going to be a little bit of a review. Some of these are not. Okay, so let's start by looking at, first, actually, let's make a key point. With all of these types of equations, so with any equation that you guys get that's factorable, remember the first thing you always want to do is you always want to make sure that equations are equal to 0. So first, make sure the equation is set equal to 0. Then factor. Okay, so it's always important that you make sure the equation is set equal to 0. So let's start with one that you know how to do. So if I gave you x cubed minus 81x equals 0, I would want you guys to solve that. So that should be something you guys already know how to do. I'll give you a hint. Start with a GCF. So try this one on your own. So pause me here, start with a GCF, and then you should probably be able to continue it. And then come back and check your work. So try that one on your own and then come back. So like I said, your first step is to factor out a GCF. I factored out an x, and I was left with x squared minus 81. I can keep factoring that though, so keep going from there. I can keep factoring because x squared minus 81 was a difference of squares. So I can factor it to be x plus 9 times x minus 9. And now from there, now that it's completely factored, I can set each factor equal to 0. It's really important that you don't forget the GCF. So we set x equal to 0, x plus 9 equals 0, x minus 9 equals 0. And now I can solve. This one's already solved for. X is equal to 0. Subtract 9, and I get x equals negative 9. And add 9, I get x equals positive 9. So my answers here are 0 and plus or minus 9. Okay, so that does it for number 1. Let's look at this next one for 2. Okay, so if I gave you 5x cubed equals 3x squared, how would you first start to solve that? So what would we do first? Hopefully you're reading first up here in that line. First, make sure the equation is set equal to 0, then factor. So the first thing you'd want to do is move everything to one side of the equation. I typically will look at the higher exponent and move like whatever is lower to the other side. So I'm going to move the 3x squared over. So I'm just going to subtract 3x squared. 5x cubed and 3x squared are not like terms because they have different exponents. So that would be now my equation set equal to 0. So now what I want you guys to do is factor it. So start by factoring your equation. So try it on your own, pause me here if you need to, and then come back to check your work. So all you could really do with this one is factor out a GCF. And then that's as factored as it gets. So now we can set each factor equal to 0. X squared equals 0. And 5x minus 3 equals 0. And now I can solve for x. So I want to solve this one by just square rooting both sides, which the square root of 0 is just 0. And then add 3, divide by 5, and I get my two solutions, 0 and 3/5. Remember, you're not writing these as ordered pairs. You can, but remember that would be 0, 0, and then 3/5 0. If you wrote these with parentheses, you're telling me that you have a point at 0, 3/5, which is a y-intercept, no longer an x-intercept. So what we're always solving for in these is we are solving for our x-intercepts. Okay, so those should be kind of like a little bit of review. So let's move on to something a little bit more challenging. Okay, so number 3, we are going to have 2x plus 5 squared minus 2x plus 5 minus 6 equals 0. Okay, so there's a few different ways that you guys can tackle this. You could multiply this all out, combine like terms, factor it, and then go from there. But one method that we're going to use is something called u substitution. So if instead I wrote this equation, as x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0, would you guys be able to factor that? And hopefully you're thinking, yeah, of course, because we know two numbers that multiply together to get us -6 and add to get us -1. Now, what we can do is we can actually rewrite this equation so it does look like this, and that's using u substitution. So what u substitution is, and like we are going to use it in terms of like quadratics, but often you're going to use u substitution a lot. You use it in pre-calc, you use it in calc, so it's something that you're going to see a lot. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to let u equal to that whole thing, 2x plus 5. And then I'm again going to let u equal this 2x plus 5. So if we let u be equal to 2x plus 5, we can actually rewrite this as u squared, because it's 2x plus 5 squared, minus u minus 6 equals 0. Now, this I know isn't using an x, but we use u because we already had an x in our problem. So u squared minus u minus 6 is factored just like this one. So what two numbers multiply together to get us -6 and add to get us -1? Well, that would be -3 and +2. Okay, so what we want to keep doing is we want to keep solving for u right now. So now that it's completely factored, we can set each factor equal to 0. And then I'll solve for u. So add 3, I get u equals 3. Subtract 2, I get u equals -2. So once you've solved for u, that's when, because remember, we're trying to solve for x. So once I've solved for u, that's when I'm going to resubstitute back in the 2x plus 5. So let's just make a note of that. So once you have solved for u, you can substitute the original expression back in to solve for x. Back in to solve for x. Because remember, our end goal is to solve for x, not to solve for u. So I'd replace, okay, we know u is equal to 2x plus 5. So I'm going to do 2x plus 5 equals 3. And again, 2x plus 5 equals -2. And now I can easily solve for x. So I would subtract 5 from both sides. I get 2x equals -2. Divide both sides by 2, and I get x equals -1. Subtract 5 from both sides, and I get 2x equals -7. Divide both sides by 2, and I get x equals -7 halves. So I made 2 solutions, and that's it. That is using U substitution. So U substitution just allows us to kind of take a complicated problem and make it a little bit more easier. And then, you know, it becomes an easy problem. It's a linear equation at the end. So again, you could have multiplied this out, combined like terms, but U substitution, like I said, is something you use often in pre-calc and in calc especially. So it's just something I really do want you guys to have that exposure to. So let's do one more problem with U substitution. And then that's it for this set of notes. Okay, so we have x to the 6th minus 7x cubed minus 8 equals 0. Okay, so again, it looks kind of weird, but what if I rewrote this? I'm going to cross out that because we already went through that one. But let's imagine this was the same as x squared minus 7x minus 8 equals 0. Well, that is something that you guys can easily factor. So how are we going to transform using the U substitution, transform x to the 6th minus 7x cubed to x squared minus 7x, or U squared minus 7U? And so that's really looking at this term. Well, if my U, so maybe instead, let's look at it, we want it to be U squared minus 7U minus 8. We're going to let U be equal to x cubed. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to say U is equal to x cubed. So x cubed is going to go in here. Now, again, like here, let's think about this. X to the 6th, well, how can we rewrite that as x cubed? Well, that's really x cubed squared, because 3 times 2 is 6, which gets us x to the 6th. And this is 7 times x cubed minus 8 equals 0. So that's why we can use that U substitution here and here. So we can rewrite it as U squared minus 7U minus 8 equals 0. And so now it's a quadratic, and now I can factor. So what 2 numbers multiply together to get me negative 8 and add to get me negative 7? And that would be U minus 8 and U plus 1 equals 0. Now that it's completely factored, I can set each factor equal to 0. U minus 8 equals 0 and U plus 1 equals 0. And then I can solve. So U equals 8, U equals negative 1. So once I get U by itself, that's when I can substitute back in the x cubed, just like I did up here. So once you've solved for U, you can substitute the original expression back in to solve for x. So U, we'd substitute back in x cubed equals 8. And then same with here, we'd substitute in x cubed equals negative 1. So to solve both of these, to undo a cubed, we just cube root both sides. And so the cube root of x cubed is x. The cube root of 8 is 2. And then cube root both sides here. Cube root both sides here. Cube root of x cubed is x. And the cube root of negative 1, what times itself 3 times gets us negative 1? Well, that's negative 1. So my 2 solutions are 2 and negative 1. And that is using U substitution. And that's it for our 1.4. That's the second half of 1.4. So we'll do more practice with these in class. But if you guys have any questions, remember you guys need to ask me them in class, and we can go over any questions or concerns you guys have. So have a great day, and I will see you guys soon. Bye, guys.